Hello, friends and extended family. Brian James here. Sorry, I have been struggling to make a video lately. You know the old saying, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. As adoptees, I guess that's tricky. Tomorrow's my birthday, the day I lost my entire family 46 years ago tomorrow. And anyways, it's tough. It's a tough day. Um, you know, it's there's I've seen some other adoptees talking about it that had birthdays today and whatnot, and it's a little tricky at best. Our birthdays. Um, there was a situation whereas someone had kind of I wasn't I don't want much for my birthdays. I don't like being the center of attention. That's for sure, especially on that particular day, because it makes me think of origins, and I don't want people to think of my origins abandoned, and then put through the Canadian adoption experiment. That's what I call it because there's just way too many lab rat experiments that have gone on in my life. Too much governmental interference that's just too conveniently overlaid on childhood psychological development and how to screw that up. And I've overcome a lot in my life, and I certainly don't want to be a victim anymore. And if that's the case, the first thing I had to do was admit that I was a victim, and that took 40 years to admit that I'd been a victim, that I'd been duped, I'd been outsmarted, and I was led to believe things because it was hard not to believe them. And anyway, so that's sort of why I've been not talking. And then on top of that, as I'm trying to put myself back together in a better, stronger, more functional manner, the world has decided to take itself apart and try to put it back in the opposite way. So to take anything functional and enjoyable from our culture, our society, our communities, and destroy them and remove any fun from them. Uh, I just want to give you a quick example of one of my passions that I picked up again after dropping it at 13 because, I was afraid of being labeled a nerd by my adoptive father and, scoring well in school and stuff like that. Sometimes, there was a bit of mockery that went with that because he wasn't a smart guy. And anyways, so with Dungeons and Dragons lately, these idiot communist useful idiots have gotten involved in that. Basically, this critical studies bullshit and all that stuff. It basically it's people who are disenfranchised who have been given a tool to deconstruct anything that other people enjoy and to wreck it because they don't get to enjoy it. So, for example, I my adopted parents couldn't afford to put me in hockey. My birth brother is a professional hockey player, so but at the same token, didn't like hockey because I couldn't afford the equipment and I was excluded. So all that being said, if I was one of these critical social justice idiots, I would then take offense that some children can't play hockey and it makes them feel bad. Sure, maybe I felt a little bad, but the same token, there was other things I could do that didn't cost as much money, and there was, I guess there's pros and cons to everything, right? So maybe if you can't play hockey, you got to meet some different sorts of friends, and maybe that's the times I would be stuck in books, reading, and things like that. So, I mean, there's always positives to be found. But at the same token, if you're the type of person who sees people enjoying themselves and is offended by that, there's something wrong with you. And sure, I mean, it's natural for people to be envious, but we need to know that that's not a functional emotion, and it doesn't do us any favors. And if you can't control your envy or jealousy or whatnot, you need help. You need spiritual, psychological, mental help, and you should go get it. The other big problem I'm having these days is these support groups that seem to be operating backwards to cause people to be more neurotic, to drag people into being offended by more things or triggered by more things. If you grew up in a home where, say, for example, a mouse, you're a little child, you've never seen a mouse runs across the floor. Now, a mouse, if you get down to it, it's Disney character. They're considered rodents, but man, they're cute. Their cute little faces and their little hands, and they're furry and they're soft. And if your mom got up on the chair and screamed at the top of her lungs, well, that's going to tell you something about mice. That's going to be traumatic, that experience. So that's how trauma sort of works, right? It was like James Watson, who had a child touch a bunny, and every time he touched the bunny, he'd blow a foghorn. And eventually the child is terrified of soft, furry, fuzzy. That's a bad thing. And that's what's happening. So now, pay attention to what I've just said. Okay? Because now, in our society, when we bring up certain things or certain people, it can be a very traumatic reaction. And it can be very anxiety producing. And it can cause you negative feelings that you don't care for. So, that being said, what do we do with things that cause us distress and anxiety and whatnot? We try to avoid them, or we try to rid ourselves of them. Right? So pay attention to what you're getting yourselves involved in. And as far as the support groups, these people talking about, bringing a joke, an off-color joke into a support group about something. Oh my God, this offended me, this triggered me, and then trying to get other people riled up and offended and triggered and attacking people who aren't triggered and riled up, and lived experience. Well, yes, we all have our lived experiences, and some of those lived experiences are not helpful, functional, right, and they should be, they should be called out for what they are: negative behaviors that aren't serving anyone's benefit. So there's that going on. I apologize to all of you out there. I know I was working on my book last year, and I just hit a wall, and I got about 5-6 chapters out, and I haven't looked at it for months, and I haven't been able to coerce myself back into it, and I need to. And I need to keep doing the videos daily because I find it very therapeutic. Thank you for letting me dump all my crap on you and my inner thoughts and things like that. As far as the Patreon thing goes, I've got some awesome Patreons, and I don't publicize your names because, as far as I'm concerned, adoption's a bit more of a anonymous sort of scenario, and there's people involved that may not want other people to know they're involved in adoption support groups and those sorts of things. So I leave that aside, but I appreciate you all so much in helping to support my mission, my cause. And my mission and cause is simply to help make things better for adoptees, not in the sense of making us weak, feeble, blah, 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 by doing everything for us and assuming that we're so damaged that we are, useless creatures. But I do want adoptees to be able to live in and with the truth, right? That their information can't be locked away from them. They can't be locked away from their families unless it is an obvious, serious life and death situation. And there would have to be extreme rules surrounding that. And the child itself would have to be given an opportunity to understand slowly but surely the situation and why they're in it and the reasons, not some generic blanket reason. There's so many situations that can bring a child into the world with unwanted, or in a scenario where it needs to be possibly separated from its family or whatnot. But the thing of it is, when you leave it open-ended for the adoptee's mind tries to fill in the blanks. So give them the truth so they don't end up living with all these fantasy and nightmare scenarios that they're trying to battle with themselves about who they are as a person, where they come from, and what that means. These are big, bloody questions, and you can't just hide it from someone and then drop it on them at a later date and expect them to adjust to it rationally. So there's that. I had about 8 billion things to talk about, but because I was emotionally constipated and couldn't get my video going, and today I've kind of forced myself. I've been playing video games. For those of you who have addiction problems, disconnection problems from adoption, whatever, you I don't know, maybe your addiction is food, or maybe it's alcohol and drugs, or maybe it's this or this or this. I mean, I'm an addictive personality. I get hooked on stuff and I just run with it. Once I get into that hyper focus, it's hard to get me out of it, and it can be unhealthy if I'm doing toxic things that I've become interested in, or it can be healthy, or it can be kind of innocuous, I don't know, benign, not really harmful, but not really productive. But for me, what I find I like is logic, reason, order, statistics, dynamics, these sorts of things that are measurable. And I like playing games where there's rules, and I'm often playing the most addictive of the games, which is based on the explore, gather, improve sort of paradigm. So RPGs, role-playing games. So currently I'm back playing Borderlands, and I'm playing it way too much. But basically, you get a little character, you run, and there's 5 or 6 or a bunch to choose from in different episodes, and you run through these gauntlets and try to get better weapons and face harder monsters and improve your character and get better skills and that sort of thing. And that's ultimately what I wish I could do in life. Unfortunately, with my particular scenario, I wasn't given that opportunity. But again, I don't want to be the victim of it. But I think once I can get the book completed, I think then a better understanding of my scenario and why it was so emotionally devastating. And now, don't get me wrong. Again, I don't want to be a victim, so I had to admit I was being victimized. Then I had to find a way to stop people from victimizing me, and that's my government for the most part. And that's a very hard one in Canada right now because Canada is approaching communism very quickly and very disturbingly. Oh, it just makes me cringe. Just absolutely cringe. Now, the problem I see with communism now, I don't mind people who like the philosophy. I don't mind people who are kind of against capitalism and its ilks and this, that, and the other thing. But all things being said, Churchill really put it best when he said, democracy is the worst form of government besides all the others, right? And that is so true because, to put it into simple words, I saw a meme the other day and it put it so clearly. And it said, you can be communist in a free country, but try being free in a communist country. Okay? And that goes with everything that we're going through right now. Okay? So, for example, people of color, very angry at whiteness. Now, you can call it what you want. You're just saying you hate white people. And that's it. That's the deal. And how terrible they are, and how terrible democracy is, and how terrible the United States and Canada and the West is. And yet, it's like a one-way superhighway of non-white people trying to come here. For what? To tell white people how horrible they are? I really don't believe it's those people in particular. I think they probably want to come here for better opportunities and better scenarios. And I believe the whole whiteness and white fragility and all this bullshit going on is basically, again, just communists dividing white culture against itself and then having, bringing in more and more people to make it more and more our communities and our societies more and more unsustainable. And not only that, during a time of depression or recession, whichever one you want to call it, but recession or depression is on the way as well. That makes a lot of people resentful, especially people who don't understand psychological warfare and what's happening. People are trying to explain it. It's gotten to a point where it's so obvious and so blatant that it's not hidden. It's there for you to see if you can, do some research and understand psychological warfare and how it's put together. But it takes a broad look. You have to take a broad look at history, how things came to be, how certain events came to take place. You have to be able to watch mass populaces being manipulated hardcore. And I'll bring up again the example of when they got all the women to smoke in the United States. Well, not all, but a huge majority of women using Freud's material by his nephew, Edward Bernays. And he wrote the book called Propaganda. Or was it? I think it was him, yeah. And it's in the word, pro-pagan. Propaganda, propaganda, right? So epitemology, I can never say it properly. Forgive me. I don't. I've never run in highly intellectual circles. Being adopted into a less than blue collar family. We weren't in blue collar. If you ask me what were your parents' careers growing up, they didn't have careers. There was no careers. They weren't. I can't tell you they were anything besides people who didn't finish junior high and high school, um, out in the workforce, just like any teenager going to look for a job at McDonald's or digging ditches or whatever, right? Just unskilled labor. Um, and I mean, there'd be nothing wrong with that if they weren't so negative about it and blame everyone else for it and never be willing or wanting to be educated or grow. They deprived me of my education. When we were looking at it when I was at high school, I had picked a bunch of courses to go to university because I was promised to go. I had picked philosophy and psychology courses and I think some theology maybe, but they wouldn't pay for that. And then I was heartbroken and disheveled, and my adoptive aunt, who also was a birth mother, who really made my life a living hell because there could never be anything wrong with adoption because she gave up a kid for adoption, so there could never be anything wrong with it, no matter how bad it was for me. And yeah, yeah. And there was a whole bunch of other things I wanted to talk to you guys about. And anyways, I'll get on with that later. But I wanted to share a special thank you to one member who remains anonymous by choice, and I don't ever say her name, but she's been very supportive over my time here, and I really respect her and her journey, and she has similar sort of interests in the kind of researching and understanding what's happening with the government and whatnot. So yeah, big thank you to that person, and a big thank you to all my supports and all the kind people, and the special. I have a special person in my real life that big shout out to her, and it's not that I don't want to mention and thank people, but again, I say some off the wall things, and I once I get, oh yeah, with my Patreon, once I get everything loaded up from my YouTube onto Patreon, then I'm going to slowly start restricting the YouTube, because YouTube would probably be the fastest way to get myself barred from the world. But and then in the Patreon, I'm going to start talking about even more personal things and more controversial things. And I'm going to try my best through the Patreon, through the YouTube, to really try to help bring people from sort of this atheistic, secular sort of limbo that we found ourselves in, and help them to sort of break out of some of the walls that have been erected in this sort of system to keep people from exploring this spiritual. Okay, and I don't have any sort of agenda. I don't belong to an organized religion. I am very religious. I do believe in a higher power. I don't have to name that higher power, although because I grew up in the sort of a Christian paradigm, society, right? It was very a lot of Christian symbolism pervasive through the Canadian society, but at the same token, I don't have any barriers or walls surrounding what I look into and what I believe and what I research. It's simply trying to understand and trying to find a connection outside of a world where I'm quite disconnected. And I find that very helpful for an adoptee, I find that very helpful for someone who has addiction issues, and addiction issues, which a lot of people know, tend to be associated with people who are disconnected. And I don't, I can't think of anyone who would be more disconnected than adoptees in a general sort of way. I know some have really found connections with their adoptive families, or reconnected with their birth families, and managed to combine all of those things, and that's so awesome for those people. And I don't want anyone to be not connected. I want everyone to feel connected in some way. And just for myself, it becomes easier to seek out a spiritual sort of connection, sort of a comfort in knowing that, outside of this, that there's still a me, there's still an essence, and there's an essence that's cared for and has, connection. Yeah, well, it's a tricky topic. So that's just a quick, well, not really quick, sorry, almost half an hour, but just wanted to touch base, get talking, and try to get back in the habit. And we'll make some videos. We'll talk about some things, and I'd love to hear about your ideas on birthdays and this, that, and the other thing. And I've got some big ideas about maybe doing a website for adoption statistics, and I've got some ideas on how I can make it interactive and communal, and not only that, but hierarchical. To sorry, I'm struggling with my words today. I better let you go, but I'll talk soon. Happy birthday to Linda out there today, the day before my birthday, and happy. Yeah, I don't know what should we say for adoptees. Like, I mourn with you on the day that you lost your entire family in history for a minimum of 18 years. All right, bye.